a passage in Luke 14, verses 25 to 33. And that's a passage where Jesus tells about discipleship, about the cost of following him. And this is a passage that comes right after the story he tells about the banquet, where there is this rich man who invites many people to his banquet. And then when the rich man sends people to gather the people he has invited, and everyone finds an excuse. One is busy with this, one is busy with that, and they cannot come to the banquet. And at the end of the day, the master said, okay, let's go out on the streets, tells to his servants, go out on the streets, get the crippled people, everyone in the forest and in the fields, and because I want this banquet to be full, and none of those who was invited and who rejected my invite will share my banquet. So he tells that story, and right after it jumps into that part where he tells about discipleship. And so I'm going to read the passage. We're in Luke 14, verse 25 following. Now great crowds accompanied him, and he turned and said to them, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not bear his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. For which of you, desiring to build a tower, does not first sit down and count the cost, whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it begin to mock him, saying, this man began to build and was not able to finish. Or what king going out to encounter another king in war will not sit down first and deliberate whether he is able with 10,000 to meet him who comes against him with 20,000? And if not, while the other is yet a great way off, he sends a delegation and asks for terms of peace. So therefore, any one of you who does not renounce all that he has cannot be my disciple. Wow. So that sounds quite tough, when you read that, like hate your own father, hate your mother, hate your family, hate yourself. Like even just the word hate, like in the Bible, that's like, sounds very strange. And that's a verse that always struck me and even caused me a lot of some sorrow, reading that. I said, well, I want to follow you, Jesus, but is it really so hard that I need to start hating people? And so this is, of course, has caused a lot of comments, the use of this word hate, because you could think he says, hate your mother and your father. Well, that would be against one of the commandments, the 10 commandments. You have one commandment saying you need to honor and love your father and your mother. And then you have the greatest commandment in Matthew, love God with all your soul and all your mind, but then also love your neighbor as yourself. So that the greatest commandment from Jesus is love God, love your neighbor as you love yourself. So also love yourself. We're not supposed to hate. Hate is like kind of a strange word coming from Jesus' mouth. And this is why we have to read that also in connection with the same statement that Jesus makes in Matthew 10:37, where he doesn't use the translation in Greek doesn't use the word hate. It says love less. So it's more about loving what is close to you, loving your father, loving your kids, loving your wife, less than you love Jesus. It's not about hating. It's not about hating. It's about putting Jesus above everything else, that he should have the first priority. And that's what he says in Matthew 10:37. I'm just going to read that because it just sheds some additional light on that very strong and a bit disturbing sometimes passage in Luke. So Matthew 10:37, whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me, and whoever does not take his cross and follow me is not worthy of me. So here he's talking about discipleship, but he's not talking about hating. He's talking just about who do you love more at the end of the day. Do you love Jesus? Do you love God more than all the rest that you have in your life? And that's the way I think we should read it, and that's the way we should understand it. But of course, family divisions because of faith, this is something that Jesus also talks about. And again, back to Luke, in Luke 12 verse 51, it talks about the divisions that will be created when someone in a family decides to follow Jesus and maybe the others are not on the same track, right? He says in 12:51 from Luke, "Do you think that I have come to give peace on earth? No, I tell you, but rather division. For from now on, in one house there will be 5 divided, 3 against 2 and 2 against 3. They will be divided, father against son, son against father, mother against daughter, daughter against mother, mother-in-law against her daughter-in-law, and daughter-in-law against mother-in-law." So he's talking about, it's not about hating, it's just about not everyone wants to follow Jesus. Not everyone wants to be on that path with Jesus. And you're gonna face frictions in the world, of course. This is a fallen world, so it is a world that doesn't want to follow necessarily Jesus, but you might also face tensions in your family, and we know this is the case. This has been the case historically, and we know it's still the case today that you would face that. So that's one thing he's saying. The next thing he's saying is this, back to our passage in Luke, is talking about taking up our cross. And what does he mean with that cross? Of course, the cross is the cross of the crucifixion that he had to take when he went to his crucifixion. And remember that this story in Luke comes at the moment in the Bible where Jesus is actually traveling towards Jerusalem. So the crowds are following him, but he's already on his way to Jerusalem, where he eventually will be crucified, where he will carry his own cross. So this is what he's telling to his follower, to his disciples: take up your cross. And taking up your cross is something that the criminals back then, 2,000 years ago, they had to do. You know that Jesus was crucified together with a few criminals, and they were carrying their cross up the hill. And that was typical, that you had to carry your cross when you're going basically to face your own death, your own crucifixion. So basically it was, when you carry your cross, you're on a one-way journey. You're on your last trip, basically. You're going there and you know you're going to end up on that cross. So what he tries to tell here, Jesus, is that when you follow him, you need to understand that this is a one-way ticket. You should be following him as a disciple. You're walking with him. You should not be looking back to your past life, to, oh, I regret this from my past life and this and that, and kind of thinking about the past. You are on a one-way trip with him. To follow him, you cannot be looking back. Discipleship is about living for the sake of Christ and not for the sake of your own desires. Another example we see again in Luke, and we go backwards a little bit in Luke 9, verse 57. You see very well here how Jesus tells his followers that the priorities should be. Luke 9, verse 57. That's another situation where he calls people to follow him, or where people want to follow him. There is someone telling him in verse 57, "I will follow you wherever you go." And Jesus said to him, "Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head." To another he said, "Follow me." But this person said, "Lord, let me first go and bury my father." And you know this story. And Jesus said to him, "Leave the dead to bury their own dead, but as for you, go and proclaim the kingdom of God." Yet another said, "I will follow you, Lord, but let me first say farewell to those at my home." Jesus said to him, "No one who puts his hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom of God." So again, very strong statements here about discipleship and about not looking back. And you remember the story also in the Old Testament about Lot's wife. Lot's wife, who, when they were walking away of that sinful city, she turned back because she was regretting her life there. And what happened to her? She was transformed into a pillar of salt. And if you like archaeology, when you go to these places, you can still the rock or the pillar of salt that still represents her. So yeah, basically, as a disciple, don't turn back. Don't look back and say, "Oh yeah, I want to follow you, Jesus, but I regret my past life. I regret so many things." So don't turn back, and it also means count the cost. And that's the next thing he's talking about in verse 28 of our passage, count the cost. If you want to build a tower, if you have a big project you want to complete, well, first sit down and think about how much this is going to cost for you to complete it, because you don't want this project to fail like at halftime and to be incomplete, because this will basically cause mockery. This will be ridiculed by people if you cannot finish it. So consider very well if you want to do that project, if you want to follow Jesus, because Christianity, following Jesus, is not just mere theory, it is hard reality. And we know about, many persecutions that Christians have to face in a world basically that doesn't want to follow the Bible. So we are something a bit different. He's talking further in the verse in the chapter as well about being the salt of the earth, and we talked about that in one of the hikes as well. We are different, as Christian in a fallen world. We are the salt of the earth, so we have a flavor that is different, that makes a certain difference in the world. But not everyone likes that, like the world doesn't really like this strange flavor of these Christians who pray, who believe in God. And this is a way that sometimes we get rejection, and it can be even from our own families. This is very, very well possible. So count the cost. It's a big project, and make sure that you're able to finish it. You're on a way. You're on a project, really following Jesus. Make sure that you stick to that, because Jesus wants to do something with your life. He wants to work in your hearts. So don't turn back. Don't look back. And then it talks in verse 33 about giving up possessions. And here, this has been debated a lot, whether it means, okay, we need to sell everything and sell everything we own, or whether this rather means yielding ownership, right? What we own it, but it's not our own at the end of the day, because everything we have materially, was granted to us by God. Our possessions, our job, our family also. This is a blessing. This is a gift of God. But it doesn't belong to us. So our possessions don't really belong to us. We should look at this more as stewards of God's possessions. So what we have has been granted to us by God. So we should be using that in a wise way. In Luke 16, there is this parable of the shrewd manager. This manager, God gave him money to manage, and then this manager didn't do a good job. He was not managing that money correctly, and then the master came to him and said, "Yeah, I'm gonna remove that responsibility from you because you're not a good manager." And then there was a story that he had to collect the debts from various people that were owing money to his master, and he did that by giving discounts to people illegally. So it was very, very the story of the shrewd manager. So he was not making a wise use of the possessions that God had entrusted to him. And we should think about that story as well. It's about giving up possessions. It's about not thinking that what we have belongs to us and that we can do whatever we want with it, because it has been granted to us by God. So we should use that wisely. So that's really what he says in verse 33 of our passage, when he says, "So therefore, any one of you who does not renounce all that he has cannot be my disciple." So the word renounce is not about you need to sell everything you have and give it to the church, to the poor. It's more about consider that what you have is not really your own property. You are just managers of that property. You're a steward of what God has granted you. Yeah, and if I look at today, reading this Rütli declaration, this federal charter, when these cantons were committing to help the other cantons at their own expense, that they would send soldiers at their own expense. I was just thinking, what a commitment that is. They must have also sat down with their local people to say, are we really ready to go into that agreement? Because what does it mean if we live in Uri over there and the guys in Schwyz get attacked? Means we need to send our troops at our own expense, and some of us will get killed. We have a wife and kids at home. What happens to that? Quite a commitment to make, to say we're going to do this at our own expense. Because you could have imagined that they said, okay, we make an agreement that we help each other in war, but if you need to pay us a certain amount for if we lose that number of men, you have to pay that. So kind of more like soldiers, mercenaries. But that was not what was being in their mind. There was really like more to say, okay, we're going to stick together and no matter what the cost will be. So they counted that cost. They knew that that could cost a lot. And if you look at the project that they started, actually, it grew quite nicely because you had other cantons then joining, and it's been ongoing for 700 years. So the result is not that bad. So it kind of made me think of what Jesus says about building the tower. You have it's a big project. So first you need to sit down and think, do we really want to do that? Do we have the strength to do that? Do we have the resources to do that? They thought they had that, and they managed to stick together, and that eventually the country also grew to the size that it has today, and it's still quite wealthy, but with all the problems and the challenge that this country is also facing. But there's just a little parallel. It's not like really an application for our daily life, but as we all live in Switzerland, or most of us, I think it's quite interesting to see that parallel also with that statement in the oath that these cantons were making. And then more for us, our decision to follow Christ. And I don't know how dramatic was your personal story of conversion, and every story is different. I know for some people these are very, very dramatic stories. I know a friend of mine, a pastor, he used to be a drug addict, and from one day to the other converted, followed Jesus, never looked back to drugs. Another one I know was a drug dealer, completely changed, with Jesus. So these are very dramatic conversions. But then other people, they might just, maybe you grew up in a Christian family, you went to church with your parents, and at some point, when you were a teenager or a kid, you took a decision for Jesus, just said, okay, now I'm ready, I'm taking my decision, I'm going to follow Jesus, and then you got baptized. Maybe that was not that dramatic, so every story is individual, so I don't want to make generalities here. But what I know is that no matter what is your story of conversion, God has a project for you. He wanted you to follow you, and that's why He started this project in your heart. That's why He touched your heart. He called you at some point, whether you were a child, a teenager, or an adult man. I converted, I was 35 years old, so if you look, my life before was very different. And no matter when and how He called you and how dramatic was your conversion, God wants to move something as a plan for your life, but the question is, are you still clinging to things from the past? Are there still things that disturb you in your walk with Jesus, that you cannot focus on the past, that you're still saying, yeah, I want to go, but at the same time, I don't want to go too far or too fast because there's still something holding me back? Can be your possessions, can be material things, can be many things. So that's just an open question, and I think more for reflection for each of us personally and individually. And the question is also count the cost. Can you complete the work? Can you complete the project that God has put in your heart for your life? Are you ready to do it? You know that it might entail certain sacrifice. It is true. The Bible tells us it's full of sacrifices, of decisions we have to make, hard decisions sometimes to cut off with certain things. And yeah, back to the story that just comes before that statement about counting the cost, the story about the banquet that I just started with. Are you always busy with something else, right? You have a call from Jesus. He invited you to that banquet, that mass. He said, come to my banquet, you're my guests of honor. And then you saw these guests in the story say, I'm busy, I need to do this and that. Let me just give you the concrete examples because it's quite interesting in that passage of Luke, the excuses that they find, and I just think of some times where I personally said no to certain projects for certain reasons. So they all alike began to make excuses. The first said to him, I have bought a field and I must go out and see it. Please have me excused. Okay, so the guy bought a field. Fine. And he cannot go to the banquet because he needs to look to see his field, or maybe I said, I bought a new car. Sorry, I cannot come to the banquet because I want to have a ride with my new car or my new motorbike. It could be something like this. Another said, I have bought 5 yoke of oxen and I go to examine them. Please have me excused. Again, he bought some possessions. It's so cool. I have new oxen. I need to see if they're okay. These cows. Let's see how they are. And I'm not going to the banquet. The other one said, I have married a wife, and therefore I cannot come. Wow. You know how the marriage also is important in the Bible, Ephesians 5. we know this godly institution of marriage. But even there, someone found an excuse. I said, I'm not going to the banquet because I have a wife. So, you know, again, I know it's hard because, but it's what the Bible tells us. Jesus and God should be number one, you know, should be number one, even before our wife, our kids, our possessions, of course, but even the family, you know. And I know it's hard, but this is what the Bible tells us. And of course, it's not about hating anyone. It's about loving, of course, everyone, loving our family, always in a loving way. But just make sure that you love God the most. That's the most important thing. Yeah, so that's the question, you know, for us. Are you always busy with something else? You have been invited to a banquet. Try to attend a banquet, you know. There's many excuses, are sometimes silly excuses that we make up because we are not really ready to go to that banquet or to celebrate. And I know a guy, he had a great project and he wanted to go to ministry full time. He was working in the corporate world, you know, a super job. His company was an expat. His company was paying everything for him, paying the car, paying the apartment. They wanted to send him to other countries across the world, extremely good salary. But this guy had on his heart, you know, to go into ministry. And he said, yeah, it's fine. I'm gonna go to ministry. I'm gonna resign my job. It was a very hard decision, you know, because he had all this super package from the expat. He said, yeah, I'm gonna go. He had been contacted by a ministry organization to serve, you know, for some youth ministries, I think, across Europe. He said, yeah, I'm gonna do that. This ministry organization was providing some salary. It's not like he would have no money, but would have earned like, you know, not even 50% of what he was earning, or even much less than that. So he said, I'm going to do it because I want to follow God. So he quit his job. He quit all these super expat packages. I'm going to do that. And he went even to Bible school, started studying, you know. And then he said, yeah, it's good. I really like that. I love following God. I love what I'm doing. And then this project with the ministry organization didn't work out because they didn't get the funds. They say, now we cannot even pay you the little salary that we're going to pay you. We can pay nothing. As a matter of fact, we cannot even take you because we don't have that position anymore. Well, you could be a volunteer if you finance yourself with your savings and everything. And the guy was like, oh no, I cannot do that. That's too much. Now this is asking too much for me because now I'm really going to live by faith only, I mean, without any external money coming in. And then at the same time, this guy got an offer, you know, from a company because he was still connected with the corporate world. Got an offer, you know, to go for a job, different place. And he said, oh, you know what, I'm going to take that offer because it's more comfortable. I'm going to have a salary and, yeah, ministry. It can wait, you know, I will get a call later, you know, that's fine. And he went back to the corporate world, right? So, you know, these are difficult decisions, right? You have to count the cost. You have to know that sometimes things are going to turn out a bit differently. Also, when you follow God, it's not going to be without any obstacles. You know, maybe a mission organization calls you or a project calls you, and maybe there will be some hurdles on the way. Maybe the money doesn't come together, and then you have to trust that God will fix it. And if you have it in your heart, really to follow God, and this guy had that in his heart, you know. So it was not that he rejected God. No, he wanted to follow, but just it was the cost. The cost was too high for him. He could not accept that cost. You know, say, just live by faith. How can I do that, you know? So, just a little story I wanted to share to illustrate that a little bit, what it means. So, yeah, God has a great project for our life. That's why he has touched your heart at some point in your life. And that's why you have also made this decision to follow him. And make sure that you keep always this focus on him. He's the shepherd. He's the guide, and we have the church, of course, as brothers, sisters. We're also here to support each other because we're all part of that same project. We want to follow him, right? So I think also I really appreciate this fellowship with you because it's I think a mutual encouragement that you see we're all on a path, we're all on a way. That's why we call this hike also "I'm the way." You know, that's a statement of Jesus in John. He says, "I'm the way." So let's try to follow him. Yeah. And I also wanted just to say, and I mentioned that last time as well, that this men's ministry is really, for me, it goes beyond just